Buongiorno a tutti and benvenuti to your final supplemental video where we will be reviewing the lesson from Palermo. But before we get going, I just want to say thank you so much for a wonderful class. Y'all have been absolutely wonderful, and I'm really pleased that these videos have been a help. For this one, I'm not going to go too much into vocabulary because we have that video already up. And we haven't really gone into a lot of grammar today. It's more about putting all the pieces together and giving you the tools that you need to move forward. So for this one, I'll be doing a lot of review of reading strategies and ways that you can take your language study forward, and also how we can add a little bit of color to our conversation. So let's get into it in Palermo. First, auguri, congratulations, and benvenuti to the final class. Auguri is a really lovely phrase, and you often see it used with tanti. Tanti is so many. So auguri is good wishes. Tanti auguri is many good wishes, and it's used to mean congratulations. So any good news can be met with an auguri or tanti auguri, and it's often used for birthdays. You can say buon compleanno, so good birthday or happy birthday, but it is more common on a birthday to say tanti auguri. But tanti auguri is appropriate for graduations, weddings, babies, and certainly to the hard work that you've put into this class. Tanti auguri to all your successes in this class and the wonderful conversational ability I see developing, the analytical ability that I see developing, just marvelous stuff. In this class, you have covered quite a bit. We started off with our greetings and introductions. So from the slightly more formal buongiorno to ciao, you can ask someone your name and introduce yourself, talk about where you're from, ask how someone is in both formal and informal ways. We also covered polite ways of getting attention or getting around town, and we'll review the getting attention and the saying excuse me on a subsequent slide. You learned a whole verb. You learned essere, to be. So you can conjugate that in the present tense. I am, you are, etc. And it was pretty painless because I slid all those forms that you need to memorize in meaningful phrases. So keep that in mind because I'm going to develop that method for you later and show you how you can use that to learn a lot on your own. We also learned a lot of questions. We did interrogatives and interrogatives in various forms to ask who, what, where, when, why, how much. That's a big one. How many, is there, are there, all kinds of stuff. Really, really useful for travelers. We talked about transportation and getting around. We touched on giving and receiving directions, asking, how do I get here? How do I get there? We didn't do this as much this semester, but those bonus materials are there. But we focused more on talking about activities and hobbies, things you like to do. And that can be great for conversation. Next, you learned your numbers, which is a big one. We skipped telling time, but it's in the bonus materials. And we went shopping for clothes, which is always fun. You learned how to order in a restaurant, which then builds into your customizable verbal system, your vorrei, posso, devo, dinosaur sentences. Those come out of the structures of being able to ask for things, not just in a restaurant, but in any kind of shop or a cafe. And it builds on the hobbies and activities, being able to talk about what you like to do. So all of this is culminating in your ability to use verbs with minimal memorization, but a lot of flexibility. Next, we learned about emergencies, and that had a lot of phrases and things that you can just write down and hopefully never have to use. But in that lesson, you also started getting into adjectives and learned how to describe people, and then learn possessives and family vocabulary. So we learned how to talk about the people we might be traveling with. And then you can take that to talk about just about anything and use adjectives to describe anything, add a little color to your conversation. And possessives are tricky. So rather than having you memorize this whole big chart, we learned a couple different sneaky ways of getting around having to use that particular grammar point. Um, and most of all, we learned strategies, how to memorize vocabulary. Remember how to say lawyer? That's right, the avocado method. And you all came up with some great avocados in this class. And we also focused on reading strategies, which applies to listening strategies as well. I really like teaching strategy for a couple reasons. First of all, I was really lucky and I was able to learn this in my master's in education. And second language acquisition, that is, the linguistics of how adults learn second languages, is a very new field in linguistics. And so I was very lucky to benefit from professors who had been doing cutting edge research that can really transform the way we learn languages from the way we focused on our Spanish in high school and then felt real frustrated and felt like, I can't do this. So that's something that I'm really lucky to have benefited from. And I like to pay that forward and make sure that gift um, goes to my students so that you can take control of your own learning and direct it in a way that's fulfilling and not frustrating. And the second reason is that you do so much in just 6 weeks, in an hour and a half a week, and then we don't have a lot of time together in between, and you make such big strides. But, time and space is limited. So if I can give you a strategy, that's something you can go forward and fill in those blanks as you go on. So, really nice work in this class. I'm always so impressed, and it really was a joy to spend this time with you. So with that, let's start talking about those 4 stages of skill building so you can start to design your study plan for how you want to move forward. You remember that we have our 3 levels. I jokingly call them the beginner workout, the wild woman, and the insanity workout after a sort of graded exercise program that I really love. But it's really about having a foundation for that first level, add building on it on that second level, and the third level is kind of a catch-all. It can be just extra things that you might want to do, or it can involve going back and filling in some of those blanks from those first and second levels. So remember, throughout this, you have all that material in the PowerPoints, in the videos, in the supplementals, and you can do that a la carte and go back and revisit that as much as you like. Now, within those 3 levels of material that we've presented, you have 4 stages of skill building. Now, the first one is noticing. You notice, hey, wait a second. Whenever I see this word, and sometimes it ends in an O, and sometimes it ends in an ah, you're starting to notice that there's a pattern. The next stage is being able to recognize when that pattern is occurring. Oh, okay, whenever I see that, oh, it's following a word that looks like this, but whenever I see ah, it's looking like this. And you may not understand exactly what's going on, but you can start to predict where you're going to see these changes or where you're going to see these things you've noticed. The next stage is being able to understand it and say, oh, okay, O is a masculine singular adjective, and a is the feminine singular adjective. So I know that famoso is famous, and it means masculine singular. Famosa, famous, feminine, feminine singular. And then the final phase is being able to produce it, being able to, when you speak or when you write, correctly put down O and A. And when we learn foreign languages, we tend to focus on producing. We tend to skip all those other stages and go straight to, can I say this or write this, and can I say it correctly? And we especially privilege our speaking abilities. In fact, we even say, I speak a language as shorthand to mean that you can do all of these other skills and that you can listen and understand, that you can read and that you can write. We call that being able to speak a language. But that's really the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of things going on before we can really get to that stage. And I think skipping straight to that and saying, oh, well, why can't I just say this correctly is a big part of why we get so frustrated. We're not doing that background. So be kind to yourself, be gentle to yourself. Start and notice that you are going through these phases and that producing is really In many ways, it's the end stage of learning a form or learning a structure or learning a word, not the beginning. So because of this, and because of the studies coming out in language acquisition, I want to turn your attention to comprehension. We've started doing this. We touched on listening comprehension. You did really well. And we really focused on reading because that was where my focus was in grad school. So I have a lot of training in reading education, and it's a really great tool. So um, I'm going to review the little speech I gave you in Italian on day one, and I want you to pay attention to how much better you can understand it now. And then we'll go into a few more strategies for how you can make the most of this kind of activity. So, without further ado and yapping on my part, here is our ripasso. Questa è Italia. Italia è una penisola nella forma di uno stivale. In Italia si parla italiano. Italiano è la lingua dell'arte. Per esempio, l'arte del Rinascimento. Questo è Venere, la dea dei muri. Questo è Venere da Botticelli. Italiano è anche la lingua della musica, specialmente l'opera lirica, la musica classica. E questo è il grande tenore Luciano Pavarotti, un grande cantante. Italiano è anche la lingua della storia. Per esempio, la storia romana, la storia del Rinascimento, molta storia in Italia. E anche la lingua della pizza, molto importante, la pizza. E il vino. Italiano è la lingua del vino. Okay. So you probably understood that way better than you did on the first day because you've been practicing these things. You can recognize those words and you can do it automatically. You're starting to get away from translating in your head or having to pause and look up words and going straight from the language you're hearing and reading to the meaning. And that's going to be your goal. And when you can do that, that is what's going to support your ability to speak, to produce forms. You want to ground your practice and your study in lots and lots of comprehension. So, with that in mind, let's do a little bit more of that. I'm going to read to you about Palermo. Cosa c'è a Palermo? C'è il Palazzo dei Normanni. E nel Palazzo dei Normanni c'è la Cappella Palantina. Che bella! C'è il Cattedrale di Palermo. Ci sono le mura di Palermo e anche ci sono torri. Torri. Okay, so you probably did that pretty well, maybe better than you did with Cinque Terre or Firenze. You're developing those skills. Even when you encounter new words, you're able to process them more quickly. So I want you to marinate on that for a little bit. And meanwhile, I'm going to go into a little more of how to get attention, how to navigate things. We touched on this in Cinque Terre, but I want to review it. So there are ways of saying excuse me or I'm sorry, and they have different functions in Italian. First, we have scusi, scusi, which is excuse me. And this is for getting attention. It's also good for asking someone to repeat themselves, like scusi, like didn't catch that, which is a lot more. It's a lot easier than saying puoi ripetere per favore. Can you repeat that, please? Just scusi. So scusi, even though it ends in this E vowel, which might make you think, oh, is that the to form? No, it's actually the formal. It's the lei form. Don't worry about that right now. It is weird. It's a very weird grammar form. Typically, it doesn't get taught until Italian 3. Just know that scusi is the formal. You can use scusa, informal. For travelers, I recommend just memorizing scusi as a vocabulary word and forgetting about it. Just, okay, scusi, gonna use that. Um, it's more important to know the function of it. Getting someone's attention, or asking them to repeat themselves. It's like, oh, excuse me, sorry. And so that'll stand you in good stead. Now, your next excuse me is very different. It's permesso. Permesso is for navigating space. It means excuse me, like let me get past you, um, you know, coming through. Or also, may I come in? If you are entering somebody's office or somebody's home, you knock on the door and say permesso, like may I? And even if they beat you to the punch and they say, oh, benvenuti, vieni, vieni, come on in, come on in. You say, ah, permesso, and then you can walk over um, a threshold. So you've got your two excuse me's, one for attention and one for space. And in the case that you commit a faux pas or you step on somebody's foot, you can say, oh, mi dispiace. Mi dispiace is I'm sorry. You can use that if you need to apologize. But just like in English, if you hear somebody saying something, is unfortunate, and you go, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," you can use "mi dispiace." Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. You're not necessarily apologizing, but it has that dual function. Now, if you really need to apologize, you can say "perdoname," pardon me, which in English, "pardon me" doesn't sound especially dramatic, but "perdoname," forgive me. Um, is pretty dramatic, and you'll probably mostly just hear that at the opera. It's a little extra, but I include it more for fun. In daily use as a traveler, you're going to get the mileage out of mi dispiace. So those are your three excuse me's. Very different functions, very different structures, and just memorize them as vocab, and you'll be good to go. Now, you all have done so beautifully with conversation. You can ask questions, you can talk about yourselves, you can ask about each other, talk about things that you like, describe others. There's a lot there. And stitching it all together, and adding a little color, a little flavor, a little expression to all that is really nice at this phase. So I'm going to introduce you to que. In English, this would translate to what, but it's going to be used the way we say how. And I'll show you. It's easier to show you than explain. So if I see my little kitten Lulu on my laptop saying, "No, you can't grade exams," and she's sleeping, I say, "Oh, che bella! Oh, how beautiful!" Or I could say, "Che carina! Oh, how cute! Che adorabile! How adorable!" And she really is. I mean, look at her. Um, so there you've got che and then an adjective. And how about this clever fellow? I could say, "Oh, che genio! What genius!" I could say, "Che furbo! How clever!" The quality of being furbo, clever, is also a big one in opera and classical theater and literature. Being not quite a trickster figure, but having that cleverness. The way maybe like a Bugs Bunny, he's, que furbo. Oh, what an ingenious, sly kind of character. So you see that like Figaro is furbo in Barber of Seville. So you can say que genio. And what about this? Everyone seems to be having fun. They're at the bar, they're at the club, and you can say, oh, que divertente. Que divertente. How fun. So you can use que with any adjective. And I've included a lot or really a sampling on your PowerPoint, and in the vocabulary, and of course it's on the vocabulary video. But what I would recommend is pick yourself out some adjectives. You can just look them up in the dictionary, and add these to your conversational repertoire. It's kind of like adding accessories to your wardrobe. Um, You have your basics, you've got your verbal system, you've got your greetings and introductions, you've got a lot of really functional things, and now you get to add a little bit of your own style, your own personality. So pick yourself out a few accessories, a few adjectives to add to your conversational wardrobe, and make them your own. Uh, I really like che delicioso, but my favorite might be che squisito. Squisito is really exquisite, but it's used for food, and tiramisu is che squisito. But you can really use anything. I also included some other conversational bits and bobs in the vocabulary. This can be really nice, especially since when we converse, we have a tendency to get kind of clunky if we don't add these things. And I see this a lot with my undergrads, what they say, um, what's your name? My name is so and so. Where are you from? Oh, and you can say, at most you can say like, oh, me too, or me neither. But when you can say like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, how cool. Or anything like that, you can actually respond to what other people say in a really natural way, um, rather than just going back and forth with the same questions like it's an interview. You can really start to converse when you can start adding those things. So it's not a big grammar point. It's not a lot of heavy lifting like we've done in the last 2 weeks, but it is a nice grace note to start putting things together. Now, speaking of Lulu and her big brother Hux, who are surrounded by books, we are going to go into some reading strategies. So, I'm going to teach you how to approach a text. It can be a travel brochure, it could be a sign on your hotel door, and you go, I don't know what it's telling me to do, something on a ticket, anything like that. So it can have a very, very functional um, purpose here for you as a traveler. Just, I need to figure out what this brochure says, or I need to know what the sign says, or whatever. But for those of you who want to continue on with Italian, who want to take it to a level of mastery, this will be a foundational tool you'll use to increase that in the absence of being able to go to Italy and be immersed in the language, or in the absence of taking another course or having conversational partners. It'll be a vehicle for your language learning that's more accessible than, maybe a plane ticket. So without further ado, let's review those strategies, and I'll show you how to decipher that text. So, the reading process is really fascinating, and I've been yapping a lot, but I could go on about the reading process. It's really, really fascinating because when we read, we are engaging all different parts of our brain, and they're all being orchestrated almost simultaneously to decode meaning from text without effort. But when you were a kid, it took a lot of effort to get there. You spent years learning how to do this, and it took a long time. It took a long volume of a large volume of reading to get there. You had to do this a lot to get good at it. So we have a big advantage over babies because we've already done a lot of that work, especially since we're going to use the same alphabet. People often get jealous of babies as second language learners. They say, "Oh man, this would have been a lot easier if I'd been born in Italy and everybody I knew talked to me and I didn't have to, go to work or think about it." And that's true, but we have a big advantage over babies because babies can't read, and you can. But in a second language, we actually have to slow down and deliberately go through the processes that our brain goes through automatically in a language we're already fluent in. The good news is it's not actually that complicated to do, even if what's going on in your head is really complicated. So, your first step is to preview. Don't skip the preview. Do not skip the preview. You will sometimes see this in reading education circles called survey. It's the same thing. What you're doing is you are taking the lay of the land. You're looking at the text you're about to read and trying to bring in as much knowledge that you already have about it into the text. So this is background knowledge. This is just being able to frame for yourself what it is that you're about to read. And it can start with, is it a story? Is it a slide from my teacher's PowerPoint? Is it a travel brochure? Is it a sign? Start by thinking, okay, what is it that I'm about to read? And then scan it for any information you can glean without starting to read it in depth. Look at the pictures, think about the context, and if you see any big titles or headings, check those out and see if those can give you any clues as to what's going on. Do not skip this step. We do this, again, just like all the other steps. We do this automatically when we read in a language we already know, and we don't realize. But if you skip it, you're going in blind. So uh, after you've done that, you want to divide and conquer. Go step by step. As you advance, this might be a whole paragraph, a whole subsection, a whole page, a whole chapter if you get into reading longer form material. For now, it could be sentence by sentence. So you want to do your whole process with the sentence and then go on to the next one. And eventually you'll start doing more and more sentences and more paragraphs at a stretch before you stop and do the next part of the process, which is focusing on keywords. And remember, keywords aren't necessarily just words you know. Really, what you want to do is find the verb. That is going to be the key that unlocks the rest of the sentence. Verbs are what drive everything else going on. So try to find the verb, try to find the noun that goes with the verb, its subject, and maybe its object. And then start looking for other nouns, adjectives, anything like that. And you can let the rest go. If you get that, then you've got probably 90% of the sentence, and you can look at the details of that afterwards. But start with the biggest, meatiest portions of the sentence. Those are going to be your verbs and then your nouns, usually. Now, once you've decoded that, maybe you've looked up a word, maybe it's a word you already know, maybe you figured out something in context or figured out a word because it's a cognate, sounds like something you know in English or another language. You've decoded what that sentence or what that chunk is. Take a step back and review. Figure out, read what you've read and say, does that make sense in context of this? We can get really, really focused on the nitty-gritty of individual sentences or paragraphs we're trying to decode, and we can end up losing the forest for the trees. So always take that step back and review. This is the basic way that you are going to break down and comprehend a text, and it involves a little bit of translation, a little bit of problem solving, and a lot of patience. But it's going to be what helps you figure out the meaning of the sentence without just translating word for word. So let's do that with a couple texts. The first one I borrowed from our previous lesson, meaning previous semesters. We went to Verona instead of Palermo. And of course, Verona is the setting of Romeo and Julieta. So we talked about Romeo and Juliet. Talked about the little tourist trap that's Juliet's balcony and the statue of Juliet and all that good stuff. And it's really lovely. And of course, here's a still from the ballet Romeo and Juliet, which is really lovely. So there's Romeo and Julieta. Let's try a little bit of text. So first things first, we've done a little survey, right? You think, okay, we're in Verona, setting of Romeo and Juliet. Think about things you know about Verona. Think about things you know about me and the kind of texts I throw at you. And let's look at these pictures we've got. Okay, let's see. There's a family here, big equal sign. All righty. I've already divided this up for you. Let's start with one sentence. We've previewed, we've divided. Let's read. Due famiglie di uguale dignità. Due famiglie di uguale dignità. So, okay, we know due. Famiglie, you go, okay, famiglia, that looks like familia. But since I've trained you from the beginning to just kind of ignore things that trail off in the end into gibberish, you go, okay, that's probably a form of familia, which is family, right? And you're exactly right. Dignità looks like, smells like dignity. Okay, we're going to just skip D because, that's just old preposition. That's not giving us much. But we don't really know uguale, right? So you go, okay, uguale, I don't know what that is, but let's take a look. So two families, something, dignity, right? And then we see this uguale, and say, okay, so they're two families of equal dignity, right? So you've decoded that. Maybe you looked up uguale or you figured it out from the equal sign. Um, Now let's take a step back. Two families of equal dignity. Does that make sense? Does that make sense with the meaning? Absolutely. Now, here's the trick. Because you've divided and conquered, this now becomes more context for the next thing that you translate, the next thing that you puzzle out. So that means we've already done our preview step. Now we just do the decoding. We read, look for keywords, figure it out, and then check. And you're going to toggle between that. Read and check, and read and check, and read and check until you get through the thing. So we have two families of equal dignity. Oh, that's lovely. So that's Verona. Let's read the next sentence. Nella bella Verona, dove è situata la nostra scena. Nella bella Verona, dove è situata la nostra scena. Okay, we don't know from Nella, but Bella Verona makes sense, right? There's that. So Bella Verona, beautiful Verona. But remember, let's look for the verb. What is the verb? It's is. So we're going to work from the verb. So what is the subject of What is? Bella Verona is. All right. And what is it? Situata. Looks like, smells like, situated. Okay. So we've got another noun. We're like, oh, la nostra. Oh, I vaguely remember. That's a possessive, right? Nostra, scena. Scena is seen. All right. So we've got beautiful Verona is situated, our scene. And dove we know is where. So we have bella Verona, dove è situata la nostra scena. Beautiful Verona, where is situated our scene. And la is the, and we can figure out, or maybe look up that nella is in. So we've done each word. Let's put them together and take a step back. Make sure it makes sense. In the beautiful Verona, where is situated our scene. All right, does that make sense? Yeah, okay. In beautiful Verona, where is situated our scene. Let's put it all together. Now you're going to take the big step back. You're going to look at the whole thing and see, does it make sense? So we have two families of equal dignity in the beautiful Verona, where is situated our scene. So think back, what was the prior slide? That's right, it was Romeo and Juliet. So here we have two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. So, with the right tools and the right support, you've gone from saying, I don't know if I'm that good at languages, and 6 weeks later, you're translating Shakespeare. Bravissimi! All right. With that under your belt, let's go over the next text. I'm going to go a little slower, but you can do this over and over again at home because you've got the slide. So what are we going to do? We are going to preview. Okay, so we've got some sentences here, and we've got some pictures. We've got a happy sun shining on a beautiful field of daisies. We've got more flowers. Okay, this is going to have something to do with flowers. It's lovely. Looks like it might be summer, but there's May here, so we know it's May. So we've got the month of May. It's like springtime. Um, and we've got, oh, so we've got some wind, so we've got some weather, we've got some flowers, we've got some sunshine, we've got warm weather. Okay, that's our preview. Let's divide and conquer. Dovrei paragonarti a un giorno d'estate. Dovrei paragonarti a un giorno d'estate. All right. The first thing, remember, is to look for that verb. Now we've actually got two verbs in here, and you might recognize dovrei as looking kind of like dovere. Paragonarti, If you see a verb that looks like that, paragonar, usually in the infinitive it would be paragonare, but here we have ti, as in come ti chiami. All right. So that's something you can start to look at if you see something look like, oh, that's a verb, that's a verb, that's a verb. Ti or chi or me, it's just an object attached to the verb. Don't let it throw you off the track. It's a verb in the infinitive. So let's put a pin in that. We've got a dovere, a paragonarti. So it's some kind of verb to you. A un giorno d'estate. Well, here we're in much more familiar territory. We can recognize this from our vocabulary as a day of summer. So, and that checks out, right? So, something, something, a day of summer. We know that this is dovre is a form of dovere, to have to, but it doesn't look like one we know. So, to have to, or I must, paragonarti, something you to a day of summer. Paragonare, what's a paragon? A paragon is something that is incomparable, right? So you may have to look this up. Um, and if you do, or if you figure it out from the meaning, or if you have more context because you're starting to recognize the text that this is from, because of the background knowledge, you eventually get, oh, this is should I. So it's a form of I have to, but it's should I compare you to a day of summer. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. Should I compare you to a day of summer? All right. Well, with that context in mind, let's go to the next sentence. Tu sei più bella e più tranquilla. Tu sei più bella e più tranquilla. All right. Well, this is a little easier. So we have tu sei, you are beautiful. There's our verb. Più bella, something beautiful, e più tranquilla, and more tranquilla. Looks like, smells like tranquil, right? So you are something beautiful and something tranquil. All right. So we don't know più yet, or you might be something that you've picked up. Let's look at it in context. Should I compare you to a day of summer? You are beautiful and tranquil, right? So più, what would you guess just from context is more? So you are more beautiful and more tranquil. Does that make sense? Yeah, checks out. All right. So far, so good. Let's bring it to the next one. Impetuosi venti scuotono I cari fiori di maggio. Impetuosi, scusa, venti scuotono I cari fiori di maggio. All right. So, verb, scuotono. So something is doing something to I cari fiori di maggio, right? And we've got maggio here, so it's May, and these are fiori. I cari fiori di maggio, the dear flowers of May. All right. So something is doing something to the cari fiori di maggio. And what in the picture is doing that? Well, we've got a cloud blowing on them. Okay. So impetuosi venti, and they're scutono. So impetuosi looks like, smells like impetuous. So what's impetuous? The venti. And the venti are the ones scutonoing I cari fiori di maggio. All right. So venti, what do we think? Is wind, right? So in class, a few people went, oh, venti, 20. And that's absolutely right. Venti also means 20, which is why it's so important to do that last step and go, okay, so if I said impetuous 20 does something to the dear flowers of May, and I look at the picture, does that make sense? No, so we can say, well, it's probably not 20. And this is going to help you because as much as we say, okay, well, I can rely on my phone to translate, if you look up venti, you're probably going to get 20 because that's going to be more common, right? What do we think venti is here in this context? So let's see, venti. Could it be cloud? Maybe, but clouds don't do anything to flowers. What's this? It's the wind. We go venti, vent, ventilation. Does that make sense? Yeah. Impetuous winds are doing something to the dear flowers of May. What are they doing? they're blowing on them or like messing with them somehow. It's not actually important that you can figure out everything about each word, but get as much meaning as you can. If you figured out that this is a verb that goes with 20, that is all you need for the sentence. Don't get hung up on it. Just keep it rolling. So we've got impetuous winds are doing something, we'll say blowing on or disrupting the dear flowers of May. And is that what's going on in the picture? Yeah. All right, let's bring it home. E la durata dell'estate ha una scadenza troppo breve. E la durata dell'estate ha una scadenza troppo breve. All right. So we've got let's find our verb. Has. All right. So something over here has something over here. Let's find out what has what. E la durata dell'estate. Okay, we have summer. We say la dorata. Well, I can tell that's a noun, right? Dorata. The durata dell'estate is dorata. Looks like, smells like the duration of summer. Okay, the duration of summer has something that we don't know what it is. We can say una scadenza. Well, we know that's a noun, so we can just look up the noun, right? Once we figured out what it is, it's easier to look up and a lot faster, which, when we're translating this, we've got time, you're studying, you've set aside time for yourself to do this. But, if you're in a train station, you got to do something fast and there's a line behind you and you're trying to figure it out, being able to narrow something down and look up the keyword, excuse me, can speed things up for you. So it's a good skill to have in both short term and long term. So we'll say scadenza is some kind of noun. Troppo breve. And troppo breve, you probably know troppo because we talked about it before. It's too much. And what is it? Breve is brief or short. Let's take a step back. And the duration of summer has a scadenza that is too short, right? A scadenza. We don't quite know what that is. Let's take it from the top. Should I compare you to a day of summer, you are more beautiful and more tranquil. Impetuous winds are blowing on or disrupting or messing with the dear flowers of May. And the duration of summer has a scadenza that is too short, right? And by now you might actually have it. And it's more Shakespeare because I like messing with y'all in order to prove that you can do so much more than you think you can. And this is, of course, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more beautiful and more temperate. Let's see, what's the rest go in English? Something winds do shake the darling buds of May, and the summer hath all too short a lease. So you see, I know it better in Italian than English now. But the reason I give you a text this tricky it's two reasons. First of all, it's to prove to you that you can do so much more than you think you can, and it's to force you to slow down and do the steps, right? It's about process over product. You probably won't be able to translate a Shakespearean sonnet after 6 weeks of Italian without a lot of labor and a lot of just looking things up, but you can get the gist. You did beautifully in class. So, armed with this process, you can take it in different directions. One, you're at the checkout counter, there's a line of angry Italians behind you. You can use this to speed up being able to make sure you get on the right train in a timely fashion, right? Practical problem solving when you don't have all the pieces. But you can also use this as a stepping stone to bootstrap yourself into being able to read and to listen in order to drive your Italian language acquisition over time. That's what I'm going to talk about now. Because for those of us who are working on using reading or watching TV or movies or listening to radio or music to learn Italian, to get better at our Italian, this is actually not the end point, it's the beginning point. You do all this background knowledge to get yourself to a text that you can use for language study. So let's talk about what that entails. If you remember, poor Lucy, at the very beginning of our semester, which seems like it was just yesterday, was 6 whole weeks ago. Um, the reason that she's so overwhelmed is due to the limitations of working memory. Our working memory is just what information we can take in and process in real time. And it's very limited. And everything that we hear, everything that we see, everything that we smell, everything that's going on, we're taking it in, and whatever isn't important, our brain just lets it go down the ticker tape, like the news ticker. It's just, if it's not important, it's gone in one ear and out the other. Because if you think about it, if we were to try to remember absolutely everything that's going on all the time, like our brains just can't do that. So our brain is very good at filtering out what's not important. So, and you will notice things and then just it's out. The way I described it earlier was, if you imagine, when you drove to Ollie, you passed a bunch of cars and you hopefully noticed each red car as you were driving that you passed by. You saw it, you make sure you were out of the way, whatever. You saw it, you dealt with it, and then you kept driving. But if I asked you when you got here, how many red cars did you pass on your way here? Couldn't tell me, right? That information just went down the pike. And that's true of most things. Now, when we learn a language as a baby, what our brains are doing is learning how to take every single word that we hear and process it automatically. So we get the meaning without having to think about it. It becomes automatic. But the way that works is by just spending literally years as a baby being able to comprehend, being awash in language that our brains are learning how to process for meaning until we ever begin to speak. So, why would you have higher expectations of yourself as an adult um, when babies who are completely immersed in language take years and you've got a couple hours a week? Don't worry about it. So, what can you do if you can't just be immersed in language and have that flood of Italian coming at you all the time that forces you to get good at processing things? Well, you can use books, TV, movies, songs, all that good stuff. Um, and the focus is going to be on that comprehension. All right, strap in for a slide. Now, this is a lot. I'm going to go through it. Use what's useful to you, but just know that I'm compressing 2 years of grad school and an internship and 10 years of teaching into a slide. So let's start with what you can do if you are going to use this as a vehicle. Well, first, you learn best what you already know. Having a lot of background knowledge about a topic means it will boost your comprehension levels, which is what you want. So if you were more familiar with Shakespeare, you probably got the sonnet and the Romeo and Juliet faster than if you weren't as familiar with Shakespeare. And this will go for stories that you know really well. Fairy tales are awesome for this because we know the basics of Cinderella, even if there are cultural differences or different ways that it might get adapted in a retelling. We know the plot points of Cinderella or the Three Little Pigs. You can also use this to your advantage if there are certain topics you have an interest in. If you are crafty, you love to knit, watch knitting videos in Italian, and the background knowledge, knowing what they're talking about, will mean that you can understand the Italian better, even if you don't already have that vocabulary. So focus on stories you know well, or topics you already have an interest in or background knowledge in. The more background you have, the better. Now, the next says to rely on context clues, pictures, yada, yada, yada. We went through that process. So just keep that process in mind as you work with the text. And that the material you memorize and study in class, it gives you the building blocks. You can't, unlike babies, we can't just, watch TV and talk to or listen to people and then learn Italian, unfortunately. We have to bootstrap our way into having those building blocks just because of the way our brains change after we're about 12 or 13 years old. So, unlike babies who have the good life, We still have to do the things we did in our high school Spanish class. We memorize vocabulary, learn grammar from a textbook, all that good stuff. And for that, that's going to be your tortoise. You keep at it. And then these comprehension exercises are going to be your hare. That's what's going to be easier and faster. And it's going to get that way the farther you go. Right now, you have to do a lot of legwork to make a text work for you because you don't have a wide vocabulary, you don't have a lot of grammar under your belt. So the process we just did takes a while, but as you continue, you'll have to rely on that less and less, and pretty soon you'll be just going into a text and reading it without having to stop and start. So those building blocks don't really do anything on their own. In order to make it real, in order to make it language, you need input. An input is just any material that you are reading or listening to, or both, for comprehension. And it just needs tons of it. Tons of that material needs to go down the pipe. The way I describe it is it's like a crock pot. So you learning the vocabulary, learning the grammar, memorizing all that good stuff. Those are your ingredients for stew. Input, putting it all together and then just listening to it or reading it at a stretch is like when you put all those ingredients in the crock pot and plug it in. Um, it takes a real long time, but also it's a set it and forget it, right? It's not as much effort. And that becomes more true the more you advance. So don't get discouraged if it took you a long time to decode those texts. This is something that's going to get easier and easier pretty quickly. So, what are some good sources of input? Well, we talked a little bit about that. Cartoons, comics, kids media. Wikipedia in Italian is awesome. Any film or TV that has captioning. And by captioning, I mean it's in Italian with Italian closed captioning. Now, sometimes when you say, there's a movie you really like that's originally in English and that has a dub track in Italian and a subtitle track, and you go, awesome. You put them both on at once and it immediately falls apart because they're two different translations. One of them might not be any better or worse than the other. It's just two translations that are doing different things. One is to try to match mouth movements and timing. The other is trying to fit in a screen so people can read it. So it'll be slightly different. It's going to fall apart, unfortunately. But if you have a text, if you have something that's originally in Italian, or if you can find something where the translation is the same as the dub and the subtitles, that's going to be awesome. You want to learn in stereo. So this is something I encourage, especially at the beginning, as much as possible. If you are watching a YouTube video, say you're watching a cooking video in Italian, put on the closed captioning. And the good thing is that because Italian is a phonetic language, the auto-generated captions on a YouTube video in Italian tend to be really accurate, unlike the English ones where they're all over the place because of our spelling. So that's a good source. I like music is wonderful. Now, when you're looking at a translation, keep in mind that if it's something like a Christmas song or a classical song, an opera, some translations you check are going to be more about making it singable to the original melody, and so the meaning might be way off. So keep that in mind. But finding a translation of a song, figuring out what it means, and then listening to it while reading the lyrics in Italian without checking the English is going to be great. Um, News in Slow is a wonderful resource. That's a podcast. It's exactly what it sounds like. People read the news to you slowly in a variety of languages. Excuse me. Now, to reiterate, you do not have to understand 100% at first. Aim for the gist, 80 to 90%, just like we did with our songs, just like you just did with reading. Get your text, a movie, a video, a song, a Wikipedia article, get it to the point where you can understand 80 to 90% of that, using all the tools that we did to decode. And once you have it at that rate where you can read it and say, okay, I can understand this without stopping to look things up. That's where you get the sweet spot of its being usable input to drive your language ability. right? So again, once you've done all that translating and figuring out and puzzle and problem solving, you've prepared your text to be usable for this purpose. So it's a lot of legwork, but again, it'll be less and less over time. Once you're at that sweet spot, it's not too easy, not too hard, just like exercise. You want it to be something that you can do with your focus and with effort. That's where you want the sweet spot. And then you're just going to immerse yourself in that text. Uh, just like cardio, try to get 20 minutes of sustained input a day and then build from there. You might not want to do 20 minutes at first. Might want to start with 10 and then keep going until you get to 20. 20 should be your initial goal, and then you can move on from that. It's also okay to take a 2-minute break after 20 minutes and then go back to it and do this in stretches, just like your cardio. What you don't want to do is stop in the middle, right? So if you were on a bicycle getting your cardio in and there was a rock in the road, um, a word you don't understand, something that's tripping you up, if you stopped, got off the bike and moved the rock and then got back on, your heart rate's going to go down. You're not going to be getting that cardio. So don't do it in fits and starts. If there's something you don't understand, just go around it, keep going. As long as you're at that 80 to 90%. If there's a lot of rocks in the road, you might have to do that to prepare, clear it out, just like we did with those other texts. But then you just go and just try to immerse. Um, and the best way to do this, especially at first, is repeat, 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 repeat. If you've got a song that's 5 minutes, well, repeat, 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 repeat until it's that 20 minutes. And that's really good for short videos. Maybe a little cartoon that's like 7 or 8 minutes long. My kids in undergrad, they love SpongeBob. I found that in Italian. There's all kinds of good stuff like that. And just watch it 3, 4, 5 times. And then that is going to be, it doesn't feel like a lot of work once you're doing that, but that is the magic ingredient. That's what makes it all gel. That's what makes it turn into learning about language into learning language. So bring the energy you had when you were a kid. When I was 4, I watched Bambi every single day for, my parents say it was approximately 1,000 years. Bring that energy to your language study. Read the same article over and over and over and over again. Listen to the same song over and over and over and over again. Songs are great because they're catchy. You can memorize a song without even really trying to do it. And even if you don't understand all the grammar or all the words, once you do, once you've got that tortoise catching up, you'll know that as an old friend. You'll read something and go, dovrei. Well, oh, I know that. That's from dovrei paragonarti a un giorno d'estate. You have something meaningful you already know to attach this new information to. You learn best what you already know. So I know this is a lot of gabbing and it's a lot of text, but I do like to give this to you as something that you can pursue. And I will be putting up quite a few bonus videos. I found some audio books. I found some cartoons, all kinds of stuff on our YouTube channel. So keep up at it. And just to reiterate, focus on input rather than production, speaking and writing, or translating. Just read and listen for comprehension. That's going to be you want eventually that to be the bulk of what you're doing for your language, and everything else you're doing is supporting that. Try to get away from translation. We have to do a lot of it as beginners. We don't have the luxury of just knowing all those words already, but try to wean yourself off of translating as soon as you can. When you are communicating, just take that 80 to 90%. Make yourself understood. Don't worry about perfection. Get the gist across, right? Same principle applies that way. Be patient. It's a long process, but it's a fun process when you're watching crafting videos or makeup tutorials or gardening videos, or if you are listening to an audiobook and reading the PDF at the same time. It's fun, but it does take a long time. And mostly, just remember, a 10-minute walk you take is better than a 2-hour workout you don't do. I've given you a lot of science and a lot of ways to optimize things, but here's the thing. We are in this for fun. That's what I love about Ollie is people are taking these courses for pleasure, for enjoyment, for enrichment, because it's something you want to do for yourself. So keep it fun. If you love Duolingo and you love doing it every single day and you love having that streak, do Duolingo. If Duolingo is a total drag and you're like, ugh, that owl, don't do Duolingo. Keep it fun. Anything, even it doesn't matter how optimal or based on the latest research a method is if you're not going to do it. It's just like working out. Do something that you enjoy, get your body moving. And if it's something you're going to be consistent with, we're not training for the Olympics. The important thing is consistency. So maintain that joy and just do fun stuff. Keep it fun. If you are doing something fun in Italian for 10 minutes a day, you are doing better than 90% of language learners out there. So to wrap up, I know this is a lot. Grazie. Thank you, thank you, thank you for a wonderful semester. Stay tuned for a lot of bonus activities, bonus materials, reading and listening materials I'm going to upload. But that's all I have for you for now. Hope to see some of you in the future, and you all have a wonderful journey in Italian wherever it takes you.